the chief concern is location services. If they don't know where you are, then it's more difficult for them to get at you. Like, for example, if you've used Google Maps anytime in the last year, it will, like, if you're sitting at a ramen place, let's say you really like ramen, and you're sitting at your ramen place and you glance at your phone while you're waiting for your ramen to arrive, and you still have Google Maps running and you still have your location turned on. Google Maps will ask you to review the place you're in.
Yes.
Like, it'll push a notification to you asking you, hey, do you want to put in a review for this ramen place that you're at? And you're like, that's really creepy, Google. Like, what?
Welcome, everyone, to Smarter Online Safety Podcast. I'm your host, Jocelyn King, and I'm here with another special guest, a very special guest. I want to introduce you to someone who, for years, has been attacking companies, stealing data, evading their security teams and their antivirus, laying dormant in systems for months at a time, and surveilling the executives and the employees. Why does he do this? Because he's hired by these Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies to come in and social engineer and do all kinds of attacks to try to get their most critical intellectual property. Dan Tentler, I always love talking with you, and it is a fun privilege and an honor to have you on our podcast. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So great. So you are the executive founder of Phobos, and you want to tell people a bit about Phobos? And
Sure. So Phobos Group is a small boutique computer security services firm. We're sort of a top to bottom custom tailored shop. And so, as you described, companies come to us and say, we have a specific need. We think these three topics keep us up at night. Can you help? Sometimes those topics are offensive in nature. Sometimes they are defensive in nature. Sometimes they are run a simulation against our company to see what it's like if somebody were to detonate malware or ransomware in our environment. We want to know if you can break into this data center. We want to know if you can turn off this power plant. We need to know how an attacker would orchestrate this type of thing. And essentially, it boils down to us working in tandem with the customer to validate that their defensive controls are functioning the way that they want. Because the last place that you want to be, if you're in leadership at a company or in purchasing or what have you, you don't want to spend $500,000 on a piece of equipment to realize that it doesn't work or it's not alerting you correctly. And so we serve as a measure of reinforcement to validate that if a company has some kind of defensive measures, that they're adequately functioning and that the bells and whistles fire the way that they're supposed to.
that's right. That's awesome. And you do it so well. And for our listeners who are not, some of them are in cybersecurity, but most are not. They're just lay people. We're teaching them some new terms as we go along. So this is pen testing or penetration testing is one of the terms for this. You want to describe that process?
Sure. So pen testing is a fairly narrow scope where you have, a web app or a small handful of computers, or you have some new service that you've deployed and you want to see, can somebody break into this? And pen testers will go through a regimented series of tests to validate whether whatever this thing is has been configured correctly or set up to have some sort of defensive posture. There are other flavors of that sort of work. One of them is called red teaming. Red teaming is essentially, so you have the red team and the blue team. The blue team are the defenders and the red team are the attackers. And it started out as a naval warfare simulation before the computer security people got their hands on it. But basically, red teaming is not as narrowly scoped as a pen test. So a red team is essentially whatever the attacker can do to break in, whether that's physically break in, whether that's social engineer somebody, whether that's write their own malware, whether that's do drive-by downloads, like any way to get in. So the red team is the stuff that you see in Hollywood where people are using a whole litany of different techniques to gain access to a building. Maybe they pick a lock, maybe they clone an ID card, maybe they write their own malware, maybe they drop a USB stick somewhere and hope somebody plugs it in. But they use all of these different techniques together to orchestrate essentially a breach of the perimeter in some way, or somehow gaining access to a person, then using that person as like a springboard to gain access to their boss or their coworkers or file storage at a company that they work, or it's whatever the red team has been tasked to retrieve. In some cases it's financial data, in some cases it's, we just need you to break into this data center and put your hand on this server and take a picture to prove to us that the physical security could use an improvement, or we think we've done everything correctly. We need you to try and prove us wrong. And so in a lot of circumstances, we are sort of the equivalent of like a pressure test, right?
Yeah,
We come and we bring the pressure and we tell you where the leaks are. And the
right.
objective is to fix the leaks. The objective is to improve the security at the conclusion of the engagement. And so we get to do a lot of very interesting, very colorful, very custom work in a lot of circumstances when we do this sort of thing.
Well, and you really do it as an art because I've seen you at work, and I think there's this saying in cybersecurity we've always said, which is the bad guys only have to be right once. And so you're only as strong as your weakest link plays out. No, nowhere as strong as in cybersecurity except for the military. So what you guys do is really about protecting the entire organization. And Dan, I've seen you at work, and people, I can tell you he's the real deal because I witnessed him um, target someone who asked to be attacked. They knew that Dan was coming for him, and he was able to hack into their, not only hack into their laptop to get data and access to everything in their life, and all their work passwords and personal life passwords, but he also added some software that that leveraged the screen, I mean, sorry, the camera in the person's laptop. And Dan, I get so many questions from people going, is my phone and computer, are they spying on me? Is my camera, like, should I really cover my camera? If so, how are people seeing me when I'm not, like you and I are on Zoom right now recording this. It's like, well, if we go into Zoom and hit record, you expect you're being recorded. But I get the question all the time, am I being recorded when I don't know it on my phone or my laptop? And I would love, this is a meaty topic and we've got the expert here. So Dan, what do you have to say to folks about all this?
Well, so that's a pretty broad question.
Yes.
Um, and so, uh, in general, the things that we did during that documentary, the things that Kevin asked to have done to him, it's not every day a reporter emails you and says, "Hey, I want you to hack me inside out." But it's usually a good time when they do. But there's different tiers, right? And so on the one hand, you have advertising, and advertising is absolutely everywhere. It is pervasive. It is very, very challenging and difficult to get away from. As of the most recent Windows 11 update in the last 2 or 3 months, um, advertising is now in the start bar, and advertising is now in Word and Excel, which is kind of nuts to think that if you're trying to edit a Word document, there's going to be this sort of panel that appears on the right, and in that panel are going to be ads. Even this is for, I think that there's a free ad enabled tier, and maybe if you pay, they turn the ads off. But so far, as far as history has told us, anytime a company does this, at some point they just turn the ads back on later anyway. And so even if you are paying, you should expect that sometime in the future that ads are just going to start showing up. And the reason that ads are one of the scariest forms of surveillance is that they identify you down very granularly as an individual, and you can just buy the data. Like anybody can buy the data. Like if you have a couple of $100 kicking around and you're willing to spend it, you can go to one of these data brokers and you can buy bulk data from them. And using that bulk data, you can identify a person and you can track their physical location. You can track what operating system they run. You can see how often they open certain apps. It's pretty nuts how bad it is. And so these days, today in 2025, you don't necessarily have to social engineer somebody and get malware on their system to spy on them. You just
Mm.
buy it. And so are human beings watching you the way that I watched Kevin during the documentary? Chances are no, unless you work for some place that is a juicy target, or unless you work for someone that's a juicy target, or you're married to someone that is a juicy target, or you work in the government and there's all that moving around right now too. And so there are categories of risk where you sort of absorb risk based on who you are, where you work, who you know, who your friends are, that sort of thing.
Who you have
But
access to, right?
Sure, yeah, because in many, many cases, they're not after you. They're after somebody who you visit a couple of times a week, or they're after your boss, or they're after some files at work, or they're after your ERC platform at work, or the finance people at work, or the CFO. And you're just a channel that they use to hopscotch to wherever it is they really want to go.
This meeting is being recorded.
Right. I don't remember where I left off.
So in this day, sorry about that, but it was going to be really loud chainsaw there. So we'll edit this out.
So today in 2025, you don't necessarily have to drop malware on somebody's machine anymore. You can just buy the data outright. And so what I did during the documentary was very, very targeted and very, very specific. In that sort of circumstance, like in general, normal people should not have to fear that that's going to happen to them, because in this circumstance, it was a hands-on attack. It was very targeted, and it was very intentional, and it was salacious intentionally because it was for the sake of a documentary.
Right.
In the real world, the things that you can expect are what we call drive-by downloads, or you visit a website that's one character different from the real website, right? It's called a homoglyph attack, where you
Right.
you want to go to Dropbox, but you typo Dropbox, and some attacker has bought the domain name that is the typo, and instead of going to the real Dropbox, you go to the fake Dropbox and you enter your credentials, and now the fake Dropbox has your Dropbox password. And that sort of attack is passive in nature. They're not after you directly, maybe, unless they send you a spam or a phish or something that gets you to click to go to the fake version of the site, which that's also very, very common. Is pixel perfect remakes of Microsoft logins, of Google logins, of various Apple iCloud, of pick your poison. Like any place that's a cloud thing that you have your data in, somebody has written a phish for it so that they send you a link that looks just like the real thing, but when you hover your cursor over the actual link, the link preview in the bottom left-hand corner of the browser says something completely different, and it's not like apple.com, it's not google.com, it's not microsoft.com, it's some totally not actually real domain. And so these things
it looks real in line in the text, but the actual hyperlink embedded in that text is taking you to a malicious site.
Right. And so one easy way to check for that is if you right click on the link and then copy it, you can go to a website called urlscan.io, and you can paste that link into URL scan, and that will tell you if it's a real malicious site or not. And so that'll save you
urlscan.io, and we'll put that below the podcast as well. But that is
URL. Yeah, awesome. urlscan.io. And so that's been tremendously helpful in teaching folks who in some cases are largely non-technical how to cope with dealing with messages that look like they're legitimate that are very much not.
Yeah, that is a wonderful tip. And I've been on that site, and we have not brought that up yet on this podcast. So take note, everybody. You want to bookmark this and use it every day. You want to use it before you click on anything.
Like I've been getting a lot of, both in my personal mail and my work mail, I've been getting a lot of DocuSign phishes. So it looks like somebody sent me a DocuSign, but the button that says click here to sign, if you put your cursor over it, the link preview is like some WordPress site that got hacked. And so it's like very, very clearly, very obviously not actually DocuSign. It's just some random website that got hacked. And what these attackers do is they hack some very poorly secured site out there on some shared hosting like GoDaddy or Bluehost or GatorHost, or what are these, like the cheapest stuff you can get. What can I get for $5 a month or $8 a month? They target those because they're the cheapest available and they have the worst of security in general. And so those get compromised. And what the attackers do is they drop a toolkit on the website, and the toolkit looks like a Dropbox landing page. It looks like an iCloud landing page. It looks like
they're
Gmail.
Using the legitimate logos. They're just swiping, grabbing the logos and putting them on and building a mirror image of the.
Yeah, there's tools now where it's just a one-click thing. You just aim the tool at that website and say, clone that website and make it a phishing link, and it just spits out files. And so it's
they don't
not
even have to work hard at it. They don't have to have a whole graphic team. They just get a mirror image.
Yep. They just copy it, and then they make the link go to where they want the link to go instead of where it's supposed to go. And so you click the link in your email, it takes you to what looks like a login page you click login, but you're not logging into the real website. You're logging into a bogus website.
Right.
And so
And I think
you
one
are,
thing to
that's
point
where,
out, and I'm pretty sure I learned this from you a year ago or so, but the other thing that comes up a lot is even if you hover over and you think it says, I'm just going to use this as an example, but you think it says paypal.com, the second L is actually a 1 or something like that. There's things, there's that letter and number replacement and
Mhm.
things that, so it would look legitimate to the untrained eye. And certainly if you're in a hurry, you might click on it. So this is why this URL scan is so important, because it would pick up on that. It would pick up that it's one character off and mimicking a legitimate character.
yeah, it's called a homoglyph attack.
Thank you.
It's
Great.
and in some cases they won't, and some, like you could do like PayPal, right? But the L is actually a capital I, for example, but they
There
would
you
need to buy the domain for that. And so if you were to copy paste that link into URL scan would make everything lowercase, and it would be like paypai.com. And it would be very obvious immediately that, okay, A, I'm looking at, a bogus domain.
Right.
And then B, it would tell you like, oh, this website has been, because the way that these things work is if you see this type of message in your inbox, you're one of ostensibly millions of people that's seeing it, right?
Right.
They fire hose these things. And so chances are incredibly high that someone else has already reported it to URL scan, because security professionals like myself, we get the same spam messages because they just, the spammers spam indiscriminately. They're not choosing who to go for. They're just blasting millions of messages out onto the internet, and whoever falls in their trap falls in their trap. And so chances are usually really good that if you see something shady in your email and you know about URL scan and you use that to analyze the link, about 4 out of 5 times somebody else has already beat you to the punch, and it'll tell you like, this site has been scanned 5 times already today. And it'll show you like a screenshot and like, oh, this IP is actually in Croatia or Iran, or, pick your poison. And it's very, very, very
Whether it's
much
the Middle East or the Middle West, it's some hacker somewhere setting a trap for you.
in general, yes. But the thing that you'll be able to tell immediately is that if you thought you're clicking a PayPal link, URL scan will tell you very much that no, this is not actually PayPal. It's some random hosting service in, Serbia.
Right. Right. So that's critical. And for the people who are feeling so like they're afraid, of something bad happening, and they're wanting to feel more empowered, you just gave them a superpower tool, because this if you just did this every time, you can remove, your fear, because you know that between your taking the time to look at it and putting it in a known good, website to double check it, that's going to take care of your concerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. That's so great.
Yeah.
And then how about apps on our phones? I talk to people, we'll go through their phone and they'll say, oh, I didn't know I still had this. I've had this app here. They don't even remember downloading it. It was so many years ago, and it's just sitting there. So I get the question all the time, is this inert? Is this safe? Is this malicious? Should I not keep apps on the phone I'm not using?
So to be safe about it, if you're not using it anymore, you should remove it. In newer versions of Android, there's a feature that comes by default where it will remove the permissions of the app after you haven't used it for like a month or something to that end. Like there's some duration of time where if the phone can tell you haven't used the app, it'll remove all the permissions, and so it won't just willy-nilly give you access to the mic and the camera and the files on the phone. But the thing to remember is that the reason that companies want you to install an app is because you're running their code on your phone. It's not like opening a website. If you open a browser and go to a website, the thing that the server on the other end gets about you is the version of the browser you're running, the resolution of your desktop, what operating system you're running, some basic information
Some
about.
geolocation of some kind.
Sorry?
And some geolocation of where your whereabouts, you're in the United States or you're here.
They get your source IP, but
at most.
They get your source IP, but if the website is actually has geo tracking on, then you'll get a pop-up that asks like, hey, do you want to let this website know your location? And you can choose yes or no. And if you choose yes, then you're giving it to them. But if you choose no, then they don't get that information. So companies don't like that so much because there's the way a lot of the internet currently works, and this is sort of largely sad for all of us, is that it's advertising based. The reason that you have the reason that you can use various websites and email providers and cloud providers for free is because they monetize the data that you give them by using their platform. And so if they can convince you to install their app on your phone, they get much, much more rich data from you than they do if you're using the browser. And so that's why many websites will push you to run their app instead of going to the browser. Because if you run an app on your phone, your phones these days are supercomputers full of sensors. They have a mic, they have an accelerometer, they have multiple cameras, they have Bluetooth radios, they have NFC, they have ultra wideband. You have your address book on them. You have all your photos. You have your fingerprint. You have, like, the list goes on and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to monetize people in mass, if you have a platform that has 500,000 subscribers and you want to know more specifically who they are, what they do, and sort of like what flavor of demographics they are, then getting those people to install your app will allow you to monetize that data. You will know exactly who they are. You'll know when they're awake. You'll know when they're using their phone. You can ask them for their address book. And if they actually give it to you, then you have thousands of contacts and you can cross correlate those with who goes where, when. Like one of the ways that this is employed is with Instagram. For example, you've probably heard dozens of times people complaining that, oh my God, my phone is listening to me.
Yes.
I mentioned something like I mentioned cat food and I don't even own a cat. And within 6 hours, here's Amazon sending me ads for cat food. How on earth is this possible? Well, the reason that that's possible is technically, yes, it is listening to you. It has been in the news. There is a company whose name I can't recall who has a pitch deck that was leaked to the press. And their pitch deck was basically, so the same software on your phone that allows you to have a voice assistant, the same software that allows you to talk to your phone and dictate into a field. You can say something into your phone and it turns into text, the speech to text component. Mm-hmm. They just turn that on sometimes and text comes out of it. And if the text that comes out is a keyword that they can use for advertising, then they just ship that up the line. And it's actually, they call them, like, I think they're called micro auctions. Or there's a bidding process, an automated bidding process where we're on a podcast and now I've mentioned cat food and now you're going to start getting ads for cat food because your phone probably has an app on it that is listening. And that app makes money when they sell to their advertising partners the things that they have intercepted you talking about. And so the way that they enrich that is if you leave Bluetooth on when you go out and about, your phone is capturing the Bluetooth addresses of all the other people that you're hanging out with. So if you go to brunch with a bunch of people and everyone is like, no, I'm privacy forward, I'm going to turn off all my stuff. But everyone has Instagram installed and two people decide that they want directions later. So they turn their GPS on. And a couple of them have watches or earbuds and they have Bluetooth on their phone on. One of those phones, if not all of them, will be able to tell who is nearby. And they will check your address book and say, oh, all 5 of these people are here with me. One of them was talking about cat food. And so all 5 of those people now get the cat food ad because they can geolocate you because you're close to somebody who has GPS on. You have Bluetooth on and they have Bluetooth on. And so by correlating these different data points, they correlate your Bluetooth address with your friend's Bluetooth address. They correlate their GPS with the fact that if their phone can see your phone via Bluetooth, you have to be within like 10 feet. And it's all automated. Human beings are not involved in this process. And so to that end, yes, absolutely. It is pervasive. You are being watched practically 24/7, especially if you have
I can hear the heads exploding as they're listening to this going, oh my God, I always suspected, but nobody's ever explained it. So simply, clearly, as you just did, and told the truth about what's really going on. So
turn off your radios when you leave the house. If you don't need Wi-Fi, turn it off. If you don't need Bluetooth, turn it off. If you don't need
What about the
GPS,
people who are connecting their Bluetooth to their car or their headphones to listen, or their earbuds or whatever, and leaving them in to take calls and things like that? What is there anything they can do?
well, if you don't have GPS on,
Mhm.
then not much. They can tell that you have a headphone connected, and they can
So turn
probably
off
tell what you're
GPS and
listening to.
location services, basically turn it off.
Right. If you don't need, basically the short version is if there's a radio in your phone that you don't need to be running while you're out and about, then just turn it off. A, it'll save you a bunch of battery, and B, it's great for privacy. You'll stop getting those ads where it's spooky and they can tell that, you get the impression that they're listening to you because, well, they are. And so
And you're
a lot
saying
of
they're
that is,
randomly listening and just grabbing snippets of things, but
there are patents, like you'll see this will make the news. It'll land on places like Ars Technica and on TechCrunch, which are like two big, or Bleeping Computers, another really good one. There's like three good nerd flavored news outlets. These are the types of places that you'll see it. So like Ars Technica will report on this quite a lot, where they'll say, hey, we just noticed that Apple filed a new patent, and they go and they look at the language in the patent application, and it's a patent application that says that your iPhone can listen to your TV, and advertisers on television are putting high frequency audio in their ads, and the iPhone can hear that high frequency audio and it fingerprints the ad. And so now they can correlate what you are watching at what time on what channel, because the commercial that you just saw sent a ping to your phone, and your phone was listening, and now your phone can tell, what commercial aired on what phone at what time in what geography. They know who your cable provider is, they know what channel you were watching, they know what program you were watching, and which commercial you got. And so now all that further enriches the advertising data. And so now, because your phone caught you listening to, they caught you watching a show, and you were subjected to all the advertising that the advertisers put into that show, now you're going to get ads on Amazon and on Google and on web browsing, for things related to that show or things related to the ad that you heard.
right.
And so they correlate that with conversations. Like if you have an Alexa or a Google Home, or an Apple HomeKit or anything, where you have any of those AI voice assistants, those have been also in the news very frequently,
Yes.
where people who work for those companies keep getting caught trading the audio of people having sex, or somebody getting raided by the FBI, or a giant argument that basically these things listen to you all the time. Every single time your Alexa turns on because it thinks that you were speaking to it, that audio goes up the line to Amazon,
Right.
and they sit on it, and law enforcement can request it. And that's also been in the news, where if you have, your cop badge on and you ask Amazon, they'll give you copies of audio, and this is admissible in court. And it was big ugly lawsuits happened because of this sort of thing. And so the
So if
way
you
they
turn
get
off your
you,
Wi-Fi and keep going. Yeah.
the way they get you is through convenience. They
Mhm.
make it super convenient. They genuinely make your life easier, because it lets you do stuff faster. It lets you speak to your phone instead of trying to type. It lets you find a product that you were looking for. It allows you to share things with your friends. It allows you to combine, 5 of your devices into one unified sort of platform where they all see the same stuff and they all get the same alerts. And like, the convenience of having a watch that talks to your phone, the convenience of having earbuds that talk to both, the convenience of having a home assistant that talks to all of those. Like, it is genuinely convenient. But the price that you pay is ubiquitous, staggering levels of surveillance. And so that's the trade-off. If you would like to feel more private, if you don't like the idea that people at various companies are trading naked pictures of you like baseball cards, because your phone is just taking pictures of you with its front camera because you're using face unlock and you happen to be naked at the time, like, then you have to make the decision of whether or not to continue using those features. And
Right.
so some people say, I don't care, let them spy on me.
Mhm.
Other people say, no, I think that's creepy. And so the trouble is, if you're kicking around with 5 or 10 people, and all but 2 of them are privacy forward people that have gone through all these measures of turning off their radios and making sure that the trackers are turned off and uninstalling apps on their phone and making sure that they're as safe as they can be. Those 2 other people that are kicking around with all of them are leaking all the data from the other 8.
So taking it, what we were saying earlier, you're only as strong as your weakest friend, really.
That's correct. Yes. And so like, it only takes, like, if you're in a working group of like 100 people, and you all share contact information, and one of those people uploads their address book to LinkedIn.
Yes.
Now LinkedIn knows about everybody.
Oh God. Yeah. that makes total sense. And I hadn't actually.
And you know how LinkedIn
This is
makes
wild.
money?
This is wild, everybody.
You know how LinkedIn makes money from that? They sell your address book to the advertisers, and
Yeah.
it's all the same advertisers. And so like, if one of the people that has you in their address book uploads their address book to a Facebook, to a TikTok, to a Duolingo, to a pick one, all of any company that tries to get you to upload your address book from your phone, the reason they're doing that is because they intend to sell it, because they make tons of money selling
Right.
it. Because if they can get 0.1% of their user base to do that, they can cross correlate who goes where, when, that sort of thing. And it all goes up the stream, and it all goes into this ecosystem of A, you can just buy it online if you know where to look, and B,
Right.
that's how you get ads for stuff that you were talking about that you never typed into your phone, that it's super creepy and it sounds like they were spying on you, but you're like, I'd never uploaded my address book to LinkedIn. How is this even possible? Well, somebody you know did. And so you were in someone else's address book, and that address book made it up the line. And so now LinkedIn
Kind of
has
like
your
even on
data.
LinkedIn, some people share who they're connected to, will share their connections, and most of us don't. But you can have a friend who
Yep.
shares their 500 or 5,000 connections, and you're in the
Yep.
list, and now you're connected, and then there's cross correlation with everybody.
Yep.
About a decade ago, working in Silicon Valley, I remember talking to somebody who was looking to be an early investor in Share This. And so I remember, like, gosh, was this 15 years ago now? But that whole thing when you're on a website, and it can be they're all legitimate websites. It's Forbes and New York Times and everything, but they share this on LinkedIn, share this on Facebook. I immediately said, oh, I'm never sharing that, because they're tracking that to what I like and selling that. And the saying in Silicon Valley back when all these free apps were coming out is, if you aren't, if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, right? Your data is the
Right.
product, except now you're paying for things and you're still the product, and
That's
you're
right.
being sold. So
Yep.
that's the difference. Yeah. A
Yeah. I
question
think,
for you then, because we just had somebody on who was talking about protecting kids, and we were talking a little bit about Life 360. So there's 2 things. There's doing this for the convenience. And so you can turn things off, but what about the families who are using Life 360 to make sure that their teenager who's out on a date and in a car with somebody else, it's not going over the speed limit, or that they're geo-fenced, they get an alert if they're going in the bad part of town. For the people who are exposing themselves to all this surveillance in the name of safety, what 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 could you say to them?
well, just know that Life 360 is perched right on your shoulder, and it knows where your kids are too. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
like, famously, one really good example of this is, one day, a father goes out to get his mail from his mailbox, and he starts seeing tons and tons and tons of like pregnancy advertisements.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Um,
yes.
and he's really concerned, because he's like, I don't understand what's going on, because if I recall correctly, it was like he was like a single father, and he was living with his like 16 or 17-year-old daughter. And so it turns out that pervasive surveillance through advertising leaked to the dad that his daughter was pregnant as a teenager, because she was nervous about her pregnancy and started Googling how to do stuff, and Googling for baby products, and Googling for various other health related products, and all that rich search data she did from her house. I don't remember whether it was from a desktop or her phone, but the advertisers caught wind, and the advertisers went, oh, this household is into baby stuff, and just started
Right.
spamming them with baby stuff. And
Right.
so,
And that's not the way you want to have people find out information. That you need to have
yeah,
a candid, heartfelt, sit down family
sure.
conversation or
Yeah.
relationship conversation about. So
So
Dan, what if people recognize that there's this risk, do they gain things back by turning it off whenever they can and having it on? Like if you have your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on half the time and off half the time, how much protection are you gaining? Are you gaining 50% or are you only gaining 5%?
the chief concern is location services. If they don't
Okay.
know where you are, then
Mhm.
it's more difficult for them to get at you. Like, for example, if you've used Google Maps anytime in the last year, uh, it will, like, if you're sitting at a ramen place,
Mhm.
let's say you really like ramen, and you're
Mhm.
sitting at your ramen place and you glance at your phone while you're waiting for your ramen to arrive, and you still have Google Maps running and you still have your location turned on. Google Maps will ask you to review the place you're in.
Yes.
Like, it'll push a notification to you asking you, hey, do you want to put in a review for this ramen place that you're at? And you're like, that's really creepy, Google. Like, what? Like, you would say, how did you know I'm here? But
Mhm.
you asked it for driving directions,
Right.
and then you never turned off GPS. And then based on the accelerometer, and it could tell you were walking, you walked from your car into this ramen place and sat down and then put your phone down on the table. Like, they can measure all of that and they can tell what you're
Right.
doing with your phone. And so they start sending these push things to say, hey, help this company pays us to advertise their ramen spot. And so why don't we squeeze a little bit of blood from this stone and you enrich their advertising experience at your expense, by leaving a review. And
Yeah.
so it's just weird and creepy.
Yeah.
Other times, like, if you're using Google Maps for driving directions, you'll see that there are advertisers like 7-Eleven and Burger King and McDonald's and other fast food chains and other large, like Rite Aid and that sort of thing, where you're looking at the phone and you're looking at maps and you're seeing the little arrow, which is you on the freeway or what have you. You'll see these, like, advertising marketing partners pop up on the map saying, oh,
Yes.
you should get off at this exit so you could go to Wendy's. You're like,
Mhm.
what? And so, yeah, it is absolutely everywhere. And so the
So it's
big
it's
thing
just
is,
so pervasive, right?
we're up to our eyeballs in it. Like,
Yeah.
it's next to impossible to avoid, but you can make it harder for them. And I encourage you to, because just for the sake of your own privacy, because people will say, I don't have anything to hide. To which I will say, cool, give me all your passwords. And they'll say, no. And I'll say, so you do have something to hide. And they're like,
Right.
well, no. And I'm like, look, you have confused basic privacy
Mhm.
with you have confused basic privacy with basically like advertiser capabilities. And so, like, everyone requires basic privacy, right? You don't want people to stick a camera in your shower and watch you while you shower. You don't want people to know all of your passwords, right? You have a need for basic privacy.
Right.
But that's very different than surveillance. And so, uh, like, when people say, oh, we want to make sure law enforcement can get at the bad guys, we don't care if they're going to look through our stuff. Well, then
Right.
you're consenting to a search at that point.
Right.
That's different. When you say, I have nothing to hide, they just straight up use that against you to loot your entire phone. And then you say, well, you consented. You
And
said
take
you
more
would.
information about you than you want to use for their benefit, not necessarily for yours. So
Yeah.
I think, my gosh, this is so chock full of great stuff. So first of all, use scanurl.io. That's a major tip.
URL scan.io.
I'm sorry, urlscan.io. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think while I'm talking. And then the second one, of course, is to really be clear on when you want to have your Wi-Fi location services and Bluetooth on, and
Yeah.
don't have them on when you don't need them on.
Yeah.
And then and boy, there's so many
Yeah.
things in here. And then the other thing is know that your apps and your phone are talking to you, and certainly delete if you have dozens of apps that you don't use, make sure they're disabled or deleted, right? Don't keep
Yeah.
extra stuff on that could be listening to you that you don't want. Like when I go in, it even say, that it doesn't even say, turn on, don't allow app to track. It says, ask app not to track. Like I'm asking, would you please not track me?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, why am I asking pretty please to an app instead of denying it the ability to track me? Because it's basically saying it can listen to me whenever it wants. Thank you very much. So
Yeah.
really one of the best ways we can take control of most of this, or a lot of it, is to control what we're turning on, that's allowing people we've never even met and who want to sell us things or sell information about us, get more information about us than we would give to a stranger. And so
Yeah.
it's a great reminder and great information. My gosh, this has been so chock full. You can see, everybody, I told you, that's why we ran over. Dan is the real deal. And Dan, if people want to get a hold of you for their companies and learn how to protect their companies and their critical IP, I mean, small businesses, over 60% of them go out of business within 6 months if they've been hacked. And the large corporations have how many thousands of attacks every day coming at them? And while they spend millions on security, that one weak spot could let them in. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you about your services, how can they reach you?
Sure. So the website is phobos.io, phobos.io. We have several offerings that we have created for smaller clients that only need us for a day or a couple of hours here and there. One of them is called RTG. We call it real-time guidance. It's rtg.phobos.io, and that's HTTP, not HTTPS, because it's just a refer. It'll bounce you to another site. And then another one that's HTTP and not HTTPS is ode.phobos.io, and that's 1 day of effort, and that's for if you basically want to aim us at something for a day, like you mentioned having a pen test done. Well, narrowly scoped, no sales cycle, no human being. That's what we made ODE for, was like, oh, I just need you to look at this. Like, I put up our new corporate website and we need you to bang on it for a day to make sure that it's solid. That's
And
something that
nobody can
we
take
use
it over, hack through, get to other things and stuff like that. That's
But
awesome.
yeah,
That's
and
great.
if that's confusing or it doesn't work or you run into trouble, just email info@phobos.io, and that goes to both me and Ali, my co-founder.
That is so great. And you got the red team, blue team expertise.
That's
Guys,
right.
thank you so much, Dan. This has been so informative, and you've helped everybody listening learn so much. And everybody, if you learned something good from this, please share this with the people you know can use it. And if Smarter Online Safety Podcast is helping give you advice, and we know it can help others, please like it, or give us a review. After what Dan just said, you may be hesitant to, but if you can do anything to, subscribe and like it, you're helping us reach others. And I promise we're not doing anything nefarious with your data. Thank you so much, Dan. All right, everybody, this concludes another episode that was chock full of great information and truth telling. So thank you for joining Smarter Online Safety. We'll see you next time. And until then, stay safe out there, everybody.
Thank you.